Hey, welcome to Stone Cold Stros. I'm Brandon Strange. I'm joined by Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan. You can follow them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975 and read their work at sportsmap.com. If you think the Astros will make their 8th straight ALCS appearance, make sure you hit like on this video to show your support. If you don't think that, you should probably also hit like on this video for group consolation. Basically, what I'm saying is everyone should hit like on this video and subscribe to the channel so you get our videos in your feed all season as you're perusing through YouTube. And if you didn't know, the full version of this podcast is available in audio form right now at your favorite podcast app. And now you know. Guys, let's get right into it. We have to start with pitching, obviously. We got an update on Jose Urquidy that he will start the season on the IL due to what's being called a forearm strain. Since the pain was initially described as a sore elbow, everyone is curious about that UCL. Now, Espada was asked about that and said that the only information he has is the forearm strain. Hey, there's the Astros we know, right? Josh and I have been bullish on Urquidy as we've been talking through this preseason because he's a guy that has historically been solid for this team as a middle to back half of the rotation contributor. He struggled the second half of last season to what's now being attributed as pitch tipping. The thought was that was fixed. He's looked great so far. Charlie, the Astros probably weren't going to go win their third World Series on the back of Jose Urquidy, but with JV down to start the season, Fromber hasn't looked his sharpest. Big question marks around Javier and Brown. The Astros needed Urquidy to at least be solid. So this news isn't huge, I guess, but it's not insignificant. What's your concern level here? And how does this change the outlook for the rotation at large?
Well, specifically to Urquidy, the concern level is very high because you kind of threw down the breadcrumbs, so I'll follow the trail. Elbow bothering him, forearm strain. How often has that led to Tommy John surgery? Looks like Garrett Cole with the Yankees is going to avoid that, but hey, a grain of salt of consolation. The Yankees losing Garrett Cole for 2-3 months is bigger than the Astros if they were to lose Jose Urquidy for the entire year. But it was in this very stone cold Stros font of insight space last week that we talked about often injury ravaged and poor performance 2023 for Jose Urquidy that it was so far so very good this spring with 9 scoreless innings, and now that's all up in smoke. For the Astros rotation, obviously their depth has been destroyed going into the season with no Verlander, now no Urquidy. Of course, we know that Garcia and McCullers, forget them until July at the earliest. Man, it seems rather ominous. The Astros will start the season next week with 0 pitchers in their rotation who are good major league pitchers at the end of 2023, right? Fromber faded badly. Javier faded badly. Hunter Brown was lousy from May 1st on. And then when you look at the back end, Urquidy now out of the picture, there's no one that you're saying, okay, just pick up where you left off in 2023, and that bodes well. And the stretch of, 20 games in 21 days early, and then another one, 21 in 22 days. They're not going to rush Justin Verlander back. We're not going to see him until the back half of April at the earliest. So they're going to need more innings out of their bullpen, which was a question going into spring training. Who's the bridge from the starters to the Fab Three? We'll need a better name for those guys than that. So take Harden at the lineup should be locked and loaded and one of the best in the game because the Astros may have to win more slugfests than we're accustomed to and having them to need to win at the rate that we've been accustomed to and spoiled by around here for a pretty good number of years.
Yeah, it's concerning because you look at what else they have. You spoke about all those games they have early on. There was talk they might use the 6-man rotation. I guess that would be Bielak you got to put in there with Ronel Blanco if you want to go that route. I know it's spring training.
JP France to those who faded late last season.
Yeah, and JP France, it looks like he's kind of locked in there. You desperately need JP France with what we're seeing right now. Hopefully he is back on schedule and ready to go. But you look at Bielak, I know it's only the spring, but ERA over 7. Fromber's is even worse, so whatever you want to make of that. But point being, it's not like it's encouraging what your other options are right here. So I'm concerned, but I also look at Urquidy, and he's just he's never been a true horse for you. 2022 is the most starts he ever made, with 28 that season, which is really good. Outside of that, he had 20 starts in 2021, and that's the most he'd ever had. He only had 10 starts last year, and that's my other concern with Urquidy with this elbow issue. He missed a lot of time because of a shoulder last year. So you're starting to see all the parts in his pitching arm he's having issues with. Hopefully the wrist or something like that isn't next. But I'm concerned, and he was looking so good. It was starting to feel like a good feel-good story. Oh, he was tipping pitches, but now he's figured that out. He's healthy. Astros need him, and it's not looking good early on. You don't want them to get off to too slow of a start. I know it's a 162-game schedule, plenty of time to make that up, but you have no guarantee that you're going to get that infusion of pitching around the All-Star break. This is all just hoping or prayer right now with McCullers and Luis Garcia. So count me as concerned. I thought Urquidy was going to be a big part of getting the season off on a good start, and it could still be. Maybe he's only out for, I don't know, a month, 3-4 weeks if we're super, super lucky. But I think it's going to be a while. They're going to have to rely on that depth, and it's not there where you would hope it would be right now.
Yeah. So the answers aren't there encouraging internally. So maybe there's an external answer. And that brings us to the Blake Snell rumors that arose last week. Astros reportedly interested in Blake Snell, but the reported asking price of 2 years, $66 million has supposedly cooled them on Blake Snell. And so now it looks like the Giants are the more likely of the landing spots. Again, however much you put into these reports, I was surprised to see the Astros. If we're being honest, I was surprised to see the Astros being in the mix on Snell, just because that doesn't really seem, especially the high tag asking price that he's going to command. I didn't really think that was realistic. But we know a lot of times, the Astros name gets used, at least it appears as if it gets used, to drive up the price, to keep these pitchers and hitters away from the Astros, a goal. You don't want the Astros to get these guys. And so, Charlie, do you think this was an instance of the Astros name being used as leverage? And where do you stand on a short, albeit short, but a $33 million AAV price tag for Snell?
Yeah, 2 years, $66 million. Coincidentally, the extension Justin Verlander once signed, and that turned out to be a fiscal disaster for those 2 years. And then they got him back for 25, and 2022 was historic. But if Jim Crane is spooked by 2 years, $66 million, it's with good reason. Number of layers to this worth hitting. That Scott Boras would leak the Astros' interest, of course, that's a distinct possibility. Scott Boras is a great agent, most prolific agent, probably the most successful agent of all time, but he sets off stink bombs from time to time, and at this point, he's screwed his client, Blake Snell. Now, he may make a great recovery, but the Yankees a couple of months ago, by credible accounts, offered him 6 years, $150 million. Only $25 million per season. How insulting. Well, look, Blake Snell has thrown 130 innings in a season once in the last 5 years. It happened to come last season. Great timing as he hit the market. But around Major League Baseball, people are thinking, well, Blake Snell's no workhorse. How many outs did he record after the 6th inning last season? Damn close to 0. Now, he was untouchable, an ERA of below 130 from mid-May on, but he never has been or will be a 200-inning guy. Count on him to get you through 7 innings. 3 of the last 5 seasons, his ERA has also been over 350. And 350 is just fine, but he has not been a year-in, year-out ace. He's had his 2 Cy Young Award-winning seasons, and beyond that, So that the original ask supposedly was 9 years, 270. Okay, I guess you could have asked for anything like in a lawsuit. You settle for half what you originally asked for, you're doing well. But from the Astros' perspective, there's just he's not a $33 million pitcher. I mean, if he's healthy all year, that's $1 million per start. He averaged 5 2/3 innings per starts in winning the Cy Young Award. With that vesting option, $33 million for year 2, if he stinks, or if he gets hurt, that Snell opts into that. I would go back to Boris. I think the $33 million is too rich for the Astros blood. If you could get it down to maybe 25, I would consider that fair on a one-year deal. But guess what? That second-year option, it's worth $15 million unless Snell throws at least 150 innings with an ERA of 3.50 or lower. And if Boris stomps his feet and says that's utterly unacceptable, well, then okay, good luck getting what you can on the market, which obviously, other than what the Yankees offered 2 months ago, did not materialize, has not materialized. And so they're looking to take a shorter deal with all the opt-out control, as he did in re-upping Cody Bellinger, as he had to settle for Matt Chapman in going to the Giants, but especially with a pitcher. Go look at the top 10 guys in earned run average among qualifiers in Major League Baseball last season. Almost all of them are hurt right now. Verlander among them. So, it would also push the Astros well beyond the second tax threshold, where the penalty becomes more punitive both financially and drops your first-round draft choice 10 slots. So, desperation. Does Jim Crane get to a point where he grits his teeth and says, the Seattle Mariners rotation obviously right now is a lot better than the Astros. Yeah, well, the Astros lineup is still a lot better than the Mariners. Where do the Rangers fall on the spectrum? The Astros are cognizant of they barely made the playoffs last year, just as they almost made it back to another World Series, but they barely made the playoffs. So the rotation is materially inferior to where it was last year. Okay, you're hoping to have Alvarez for 150 games, Altuve for 140, 150 games compared to their numbers last season. But, it seems like what they've done and everything they've achieved over the last 7 years, the Astros making the playoffs, winning the division is darn near a birthright. Well, at the end of the life cycle after birth is death. And that the Astros streaks could end this year because the pitching totally craters. I mean, they have to be at least thinking, we need to guard against that a little bit.
I think the only reason we're even talking about this is that report from Chandler Rome about how Jim Crane was interested in Hader and possibly Snell. They didn't name the player specifically, but we all kind of think we know who they're talking about. If we didn't hear the rumor that Jim Crane wanted Snell, I don't think we'd give this any real discussion, but because we know he's the guy that pulls the trigger ultimately. And if he wants Snell and it's his money, he'll go get him. But
that was as a rental, not a 2 years, $66 million. Now, maybe they'd have fallen in love and renewed vows, but the dynamics then certainly different than they are right now.
Certainly, but we know he likes the player, and they're reportedly kicking the tires on him. So that just he's something about these left-handers. Jim Crane really likes him, and I can't blame him. But the thing that worries me is that because of the qualifying offer that was given to both Snell and Hader, you're already going to have to give up a pick for Hader. If you do the deal for Snell, you're going to have to give up another pick. And this is a team that they're really trying to rebuild their farm system. So giving up draft picks for guys that could just end up being a rental, that's what bothers me the most. Like, oh, you're going to agree to 2 years, but it's a player option for that second year. So if you're not good, you can just stay on and make your $33 million. But if you are good, then you can opt out and then go try and make another long-term contract. It doesn't really benefit the Astros very much unless it's just for his simple performance this year, him putting you over the top. That's the only reason I think you consider doing this. It's a lot of money. And then you have to look at your other guys that you're trying to re-sign and going out and paying Blake Snell this. Fromber's not going to be too excited to see that. Bregman, Tucker, these guys are trying to get deals done, and you're going to go spend this money on this. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'll be honest, I was checking my phone all weekend hoping that I saw the Astros sign Blake Snell, but obviously I wanted it to be to a deal that makes more sense for the Astros. If they're the only ones willing to put their cash in the middle of the table, you need to make the deal to where it's just not so punitive to the Astros, where you can do whatever you want the following season.
It would be an incredible addition, but devil, as always, is in the details. How crushing would it be to the Rangers, the Mariners, anyone else if they were to hear Astros land Blake Snell? But it doesn't mean Scott Boras gets to call the shots, dictate all the terms on this. And what's the balance for the Astros between reasonable expectation and crossing your fingers really hard that Justin Verlander's back May 1st, and what level of performance and workload is he going to be equipped to deliver in 2024? Luis Garcia, when he makes it back, and he will in the second half from a straightforward Tommy John, But coming off that, is he going to pick up where he left off and be a good, solid mid-rotation starter joining you the second half of the season? I mean, any expectation that Lance McCullers is going to come back and be excellent, I mean, come on. They have to look at that as found money if and when McCullers gets back July, August, September, and then before his next injury. So it's an interesting spot, but let me throw in the usual proviso anytime we've talked about, hey, the Astros have room to do this, do that. If they don't pony up for Snell, you can't say, well, Jim Crane's being a tightwad. They're third in payroll going into this season, and if we want to add the Dodgers in because of the way they not tricked up the Ohtani contract, but exploited the system on the Ohtani contract, Mets, Yankees, Dodgers, the only team spending more than the Astros as is, so that they should, just spend another $30 million, $33 million, and give Snell the option for another $33 million next year. That's not fair.
Yeah. And speaking of the devil, you do have to wonder if, Blake, as you were talking, Charlie, you do have to wonder if Blake Snell is getting Dallas Keucheled by Scott Boras here. The only thing I'd say about Crane's frugality is we have seen Crane budge this offseason on crossing into that first threshold, and the amount and years that he's given a free agent, and that was in pitching. So I do wonder if he would budge if it isn't on the pitching side, and to Josh's point, especially a left-hander. Now, Josh, you also mentioned about Framber scuffling. We got news this over the weekend that it is going to be Nestor Cortez versus Framber Valdez that are going to lead off or start for opening day. Framber is knocking on the door of an 8 ERA now in spring training. Charlie, you reminded us early on that these numbers don't mean anything, but I think this performance in a short window performance combined with the regression that we saw from Framber the second half of last season, what's your concern level going into specifically for Framber? And I mean, not necessarily this matchup, but this is a good place to start.
I think you summed it up well, that he gets cupped around and adding such a small number of innings. The stats can be distorted, good or bad, in a hurry. But as the chaser to what was a very bitter swallow in terms of Framber's performance the second half of last season, the antenna should be up. But, he's 30, not 35 that you're thinking, is his stuff just disappeared on him. But if he doesn't get a hold of the command issues, and we've talked before about getting the sink back in the sinker, I mean, if he's not a very good pitcher, he's the only guy in their rotation that you'd say you feel like he should give you 30 starts, 180 innings, even if they're not the overall quality of most of 2022 and the first half of 2023. If you're not getting that with all their other question marks in the rotation, at least certainly until Verlander gets back, that's some pretty heavy ballast to carry in the wrong direction.
I think we know it's spring training, yada, yada, yada. Don't look at it too hard. But what does jump off the page is just Framber's ERA near 8, where Ronel Blanco's ERA is 0, and he's pitched more innings. And you look at Hunter Brown, ERA in the 2s. Christian Javier has been really good as well. JP France, only a few innings, but only 2 1/3 for JP France, but ERA a tick over 3. It's just that Framber's like this outlier, almost ERA over 8. And then all these other guys that you're hoping are going to bounce back, their numbers look good. So I think that's like, what do you believe here? I guess we just throw it all out. It doesn't really matter, but it's just concerning that he's getting lit up so consistently, and that it does go along with the pattern of last season. If we would have been looking at this matchup, I don't know, from a further lens, a further time back, like classic Framber versus Cortez. I know Cortez has had some good moments, but typically you would look at this like, oh, great, big advantage here, Astros with Framber on the mound at home against, Cortez. They should win this game, no problem. I don't really feel that way right now. I'm going to have to see it to believe it with Framber. And this is going to be it's Yankees, it's opening day. This is a brand new catcher to throw to. That's something else we probably need to mention. Now Framber's kind of going back on calling his own pitches. He's going to not use the pitch com for that. He's going to have Diaz do it, it looks like. I think that's the right move. I think Framber has enough on his plate as it is, instead of having to call his own game. So I think that should help him. But you'd have to have your head buried in the sand if you're not a little bit worried about what you're going to get from Framber this year, in particular because so much is riding on him with all the other injuries to the staff and with some concerns about Hunter Brown and Christian Javier. Like, you got to have one guy you can count on, and Framber's got to be that guy.
If he was pitching for a spot in the rotation, he'd be doing a decent job of blowing it. But he's the opening day starter. And, as Framber unraveled, it was with Martin Maldonado catching him every damn start. So I don't want to hear one story if he scuffles out of the gate or just fades to oblivion as a pitcher that, the inability to suckle at the teeth of Maldonado ruined Framber. BS. But to take it to where you opened the topic, Brandon, Nestor Cortez is the Yankees opening day starter. Yeah, an all-star, a great story in 2022 as a late bloomer. 2023, he wasn't very good. And talk about injury wrecked. Right? He was out for like 6 weeks, came back, made a start against the Astros in June or whatever it was, and the season was over. And this is the Yankees opening day starter, and they're probably going with Carlos Rodon in game 2 before going with Marcus Stroman, who was offered the spot to replace Cole opening day. But no, my regimen has me scheduled to be the number 3 starter. So, these problems are relative. And the Astros have been so high on the hog for so long that this is the shakiest rotation going into a season that they've had since they weren't a good team. But Cortez, Rodon 1, 2, and then Stroman 3, who fell apart, was injured the second half of last season. And then the Yankees have Clark Schmidt and some nobody, whoever emerges as their number 5 starter. Astros problems relative to a bunch of teams. Not so bad. The Orioles had lost their best starter from last year, Kyle Bradish, for a good stretch going into the season because of forearm problems. But measuring the Astros just by the Astros, the rotation right now is, it's not in tatters, but it's definitely frayed.
Who's is better right now as what we think, like who we think is going to pitch for the first week of the season or so? Yankees rotation or Astros as it sits right now?
I'll take the Astros in that Cortez barely pitched last season. Rodon didn't pitch much, but at an ERA over 6, and I'm going to guess that it was more hurt than he cratered that he can't handle New York. But then Stroman coming off injury. Clark Schmidt just wasn't very good. The Yankees traded most of their organizational depth in pitching to get Juan Soto. Maybe it's the lesser of two evils, Josh, but I'd take the Astros rotation the first turn through over the Yankees rotation.
It's also tough to tell, how people
are going to hit the Yankees.
You're right. Well, it's also tough to look at it within a scope because Rodon's very capable of being very good. We've seen it from him. Same thing with Cortez. We've seen Cortez be downright nasty. So it just depends on how everybody's feeling in that 1 week time span. And if there weren't enough questions about depth, just a reminder that the Astros will be without Brian Abreu for the first 2 games due to suspension and will not be able to replace him on the roster. So keep that in mind as we're looking at this opening series with the Yankees. So just call me Mr. Brightside. That's going to be it for part 1 of Stone Cold Stros. To listen to the full podcast, it's up right now at your favorite podcast provider. And to watch the rest of this conversation on YouTube, make sure you check out the Stone Cold Stros playlist. We'll be releasing that video shortly. And as always, go Stros.